This is Rob McConnell wishing each and every one of you a very, very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy, prosperous New Year. From our home to yours, love, light, and spirituality today and every day from this day forward. Merry Christmas, everyone.
The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and X-Zone Broadcast Network. Now, if you'd like to give us a call, toll-free worldwide, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Exonation, my first guest tonight is Dr. T Lee Baumann, and he is an author, lecturer, and doctor in internal medicine and geriatrics. His first book, God at the Speed of Light, inspired the TV series Joan of Arcadia. Dr. Baumann has also appeared in 2 Grizzly Adams documentaries and an upcoming documentary for Alabama Public TV on near-death experience. In Matter to Mind to Consciousness, Dr. Baumann first educates readers on the functions of the brain and neuroanatomy. Then he shares his findings with brain radio waves in the ELF. Now that's extremely low frequency range that could possibly explain mental telepathy, conscious thought, dreams, deja vu, instinct, mental illness, and near-death experiences. Joining me now is Dr. T Lee Baumann. And Dr. Baumann, welcome back to the X-Zone.
Yes, Rob, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on board.
Yes, it's certainly a great pleasure for us, sir. For the listening audience who may not have had the pleasure of listening to your other interviews here on the X-Zone, sir, where did your interest in ELF and what many of us call the paranormal come from?
Well, as you know, I'm a medical doctor, and I've always had an interest in conscious thought. The anatomy of the brain has always been very poorly understood on the medical side. Recent advances have really offered us a whole host of new opportunities regarding its function. Most specifically is that we know that a lot of the cortical cerebral neurons of the brain appear to have no endings. They just come to a blind end. We've never really had a good understanding for that. Mm-hmm. And I've just recently, with some of the most recent technological advances in medicine, I've asked the question whether they couldn't be acting as a form of an antenna, so to speak. And indeed, some of the most recent advances over the last several decades in medicine would offer that, and have actually shown, that our brains emit radio waves. And I just found that fascinating, and it seemed to answer a lot of questions regarding paranormality.
Doctor, please stand by. You and I have to take a 2-minute commercial break. Exonation Dr. T Lee Baumann is our very special guest. To find out more about Dr. Baumann, simply go to google.com/profiles/tleebaumann.com, and that's Baumann. I'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break with the good doctor as we continue to investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here in the X Zone from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
Now, I think I know why it sounded so strange on the telephone. Well, it's hard when you discover what keeps you going, keeps you all alone.
1-800-610-7035 worldwide toll-free is the telephone number to reach us here in the X-Zone. On MSN Messenger, X-Zone Radio TV at hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Don't forget, X-Zone Nation, starting November 2010, the X-Zone will be moving back to Niagara. We're going to be broadcasting the show live on television and radio simulcast from the studios of NNTV in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. That's coming November 2010 to you, members of the X-Zone Nation and our listening audience worldwide. Dr. T Lee Baumann is our special guest. And Dr. Baumann, what has science learned, and what have you learned in particular when it comes to the near-death experience? Is it paranormal, or is it connected to the shutting down of our bodies physiologically, as well as within the very little understood world of neurology?
Well, Rob, that's an excellent question. The NDE has always received a lot of criticism because people thought it was from oxygen deprivation or from drugs that were administered during cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And that was one of the first questions I asked myself when I wrote my first couple of books was this a fallacy that we were observing of brain activity that we were alleging to be paranormal or even supernatural. What I found is that there are so many cases of near death with so many recurring and well corroborated elements that when you, from the medical perspective, when you review those cases, there are just too many where the patient was actually in the emergency room with like electrocardiographic leads on his or her chest, or were in the intensive care unit, and as soon as their heart stopped, you had these expert medical technicians or physicians, jump on the patient immediately, initiate cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and as I found when I was a practicing physician, was that if you're doing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, you can actually have the patient alert and talking to you. I mean, it's just really a bizarre scenario, as you might imagine. There were times when those people would be reacting to you, and if you stopped the chest compressions, they would go unconscious. The cause and effect relationship was there. And so when you look at these cases, there were just too many where the patients had no drugs in their system, and cardiopulmonary resuscitation was so immediate that I really don't think that oxygen or blood flow deprivation could be used as verifiable criticisms for the near-death experience. And then you've got all the out-of-body corroborations, which, you've got neighbors miles away where the victim was able to say what they were doing at the exact time of their resuscitation. And that's hard just to make up. So I feel it's a medical phenomenon that we have yet to explain. But I think the finding of our brains actually emitting radio waves has a lot to do to help answer those questions.
It reminds me of a conversation I had many years ago with Rial, who is the founder of the Raelian movement, and he said that's why he and his members have long hair and they let their beards grow, is because they can have better communication with God.
I cannot argue that. There's just too much we don't know and cannot explain currently.
Now, what is research? What is the latest finds of the research that you're doing that points to the paranormal as being not so paranormal, but a very common occurrence in our lives that we have yet to understand or even discover?
Well, I love that question, Rob. But what I found was, surprisingly enough, I mean, here I am, I'm in the medical field.
Yes.
And yet there's so much research going on that it's hard to keep up with. And what I found was that actually, over the last several decades, there have been a whole host of researchers who have discovered that our brains really do emit radio waves. And when you think about that, the fact that we're sending out radio waves just like a radio antenna communicating to listeners, there's no reason why, under the right circumstances, and that's probably a key point, it has to be the right circumstances, that our radio waves can't be picked up by other individuals or, under the right conditions, sent out and used to explain a lot of paranormal phenomenon that we've always kind of just racked up to the unknown and to supernatural events that we really thought we could never explain. The research would indicate also not only a relationship to this paranormality that we talk about, but the fact that radio waves in our environment can be divided up into two classifications, and that is the good radio waves, i.e. The Earth's background radiation, and our own EEG brain waves, which are very close and harmonic in the extremely low frequency radio range, which is why this ELF range is so important to us humans. And those are the good waves, the waves that don't do us any harm, that actually in many lower animals can help regenerate limbs, like in amphibians and whatnot. And then there are the bad waves. And the bad waves, interestingly enough, are those artificial waves that we've created.
Such as microwaves?
I'm sorry?
Such as microwaves that we're finding that are actually affecting us from the cell phones, the Wi-Fis, and everything else?
Exactly. They all run, in Europe, they're at the 50 hertz or 50 cycles per second range. And in America, they're at the famous 60 cycles per second range. And what we've found is that those can cause very harmful effects on our human body. And they've been well documented, causing all sorts of human illnesses. So that's what I found, and we have yet to understand what this radio frequency environment that we live in is really doing to us.
Well, we know what a microwave does in a microwave oven.
Yes.
Exactly. I'd just like to get back to something that you were talking about before, about the how we emit radio waves. And I've always believed that when people talk about the EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, that what they're actually doing is capturing their own thought process on the digital recording or on the analog recording, and that's why it cannot be heard at the time of the recording, only afterwards.
Well, that's interesting. That certainly makes sense. And the fact that, as we will probably be discussing later, there are all sorts of phenomenon within our environment and surrounding the Earth which can actually amplify our very weak brain waves and would explain why we can actually communicate, either whether you want to call it mental telepathy or even communicate by dreams. So, there's just a lot that we are learning currently.
1-800-610-7035, toll-free worldwide. Dr. T Lee Baumann is our very special guest. And thought process. When somebody is thinking, what is the physiological aspect? What actually goes on in the mind, Doctor?
Well, that's a great question, Rob, because I don't think anyone really understands. We're taught in medical school that it's an electronic phenomenon generated by potentials across the nerve cell membrane. And that also sounds well and good, but we still don't know how that pertains and relates to actual thought processes. I think a lot has to do with the fact that as physicians, we like to attribute cause and effect relationships, whether we really understand them or not, and that's true for a lot of other fields out there. But chemical transmitters in the brain, electric potentials, these are all things that we've thought might have an effect in generating thought, but we really have no idea. So I think the best answer is we haven't a clue.
We talked a little bit earlier about dreams, deja vu, conscious thought, instinct, mental illness, and near-death experiences. You equate that to the cosmic consciousness.
I do. I think if the way I like to think about it is we're generating these low-potential brain waves, obviously from our brain, and they're going out into outer space. Now, typically we've always thought, well, as weak as our brain waves must be, how can they possibly survive in outer space? But there are phenomena to explain that. So if you accept that, we've got all these human thoughts going out into outer space and surviving for up to periods of seconds. And certainly that could explain mental telepathy. It could explain why the mentally ill, with all these thoughts conceivably invading their minds, why some people might see bad thoughts as real and not being able to decipher or separate the good from the bad. I think if I had that problem, I'd probably,
So basically, what we're saying is that those who suffer mental illness may actually have a mind or a brain looking at it as a receiver that is much more sensitive than others, and what these people are being inundated with are a world of thoughts all at the same time.
Exactly. I could not have said it better myself.
Please stand by, Doctor. You and I have to take our news break. Exonation. Dr. T Lee Baumann is our special guest, and the good doctor and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues. We're right here from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
From our home to yours, this is Laura Rogers, wishing all the members of the X Zone Nation a very Merry Christmas and a happy and joyful New Year.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know.
A witch doctor's power and his ancient tribal ways cruelly collide with the force and authority of modern Africa. Africa is viewed through myriad eyes. You will never forget these characters. A young girl forced to endure a painful, cruel, and antiquated tribal custom. The sole survivor of a vicious tribal massacre. A nun who endures physical assault that compels her to question her faith. A deprived, disadvantaged schoolgirl who is infected with HIV. The translucent soul of a murdered friend. Welcome to Africa's Unfinished Symphony. While the tale of South Africa in the wake of World War II is riveting, violent, and cruel, it is also brimming with stories of kindness, compassion, and courage. Africa's Unfinished Symphony highlights commanding characters who not only bring haunting racial clashes to life, but also convey the intense conflicts that existed between archaic customs and modern influences. You will be captivated as you follow the convoluted path of Farida, of the ancients battling to become Bertha of the modern world. But are the outcomes of her struggle the best results for her and her beloved Africa? Africa's Unfinished Symphony will immerse you in historic African themes that will jolt you out of complacency and into compassion. For more information on how you can get your very own copy of Africa's Unfinished Symphony, visit www.luciamann.com. That's www.luciamann.com.
You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. X X-Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio,
Euro High Definition Radio,
and Star Cable. Our toll-free telephone number worldwide is 1-800-610-7035.
Our email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com.
On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com.
And our website,
www.xzoneradiotv.com.
Could read my mind, love, what a tale my thoughts could tell. Just like an old-time movie about a ghost from a wishing well. In a castle dark or a fortress strong with chains upon my feet, you know that ghost is me. And I will never be set free as long as I'm a ghost you can't see. If I could read your...
Exonation, Dr. T Lee Baumann is our special guest this hour of the X-Zone, and we're talking about the doctor has a new book out called Matter to Mind to Consciousness, and it reveals medical and scientific advances that support the connection of human consciousness and awareness. For more information on Dr. Baumann, visit google.com/profiles/T Lee Baumann. That's TLEEBAUMANN. 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. And Dr. Baumann, before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about near-death experiences. We were even talking about the ELF and how basically people are transmitters. Now, if you're a transmitter, you're also a receiver. And
yes.
What I alluded to before the commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour is a hypothesis, a possibility that maybe many mental illnesses are actually caused by people who are just super receivers, that instead of just receiving the AM band and the FM band, they are receiving broadband of all these different radio frequencies that are just jamming their minds. Has there been research into this possibility, sir?
I wish I could answer to the affirmative, Rob, because that's a great question. For me, science is everything.
Mm-hmm.
My spirituality is based on science. My books are based upon science. And without some type of scientific support, I just could not accept a lot of these concepts. Now, if we look at the fact that we are emitters and receivers of radio waves, I think it's just a matter of time before our really skeptical medical community has to start looking at the fact that perhaps mental illness is a result of these super sensitive people receiving, these good radio waves, the bad radio waves, not knowing how to make it or what to make of it, and having physicians say, you're basically crazy, giving them medications to
suppress
it, exactly, and even suppress a lot of their mental processes as well.
So what we're saying is that these who come to us and say, I'm hearing voices in my head, could actually be hearing these voices.
Exactly. In fact, when I wrote my first book, I actually raised the question that whether people who were, and I'm not saying everyone who are mentally ill, but at least a fraction of people who have been labeled as mentally ill might be receiving and experiencing reality more closely than what we are, because they're unable to filter out a lot of these ill-fated receptions, so to speak, because they just can't filter them out.
Carl Jung believed in similar states of subconscious. Now, how does your theory compare or differ?
Well, Carl Jung believed in what he called the collective unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I use the term, which I like better, called cosmic consciousness, because you can think of consciousness as our milieu of radio waves that are out there. In cosmic, there are so many quantum mechanics concepts that show that any type of electromagnetic wave, which includes all light waves, in physics, electromagnetic waves are called photons, basically, and they're light. So light and electromagnetic waves are basically all the same. So being able to realize that any type of light or electromagnetic radiation that goes out into space can basically have no limit in our universe. So, you have Carl Jung calling it the collective unconscious. You have French philosopher Pierre Descartes, who called it the noosphere. You've got a Canadian psychiatrist, in your own country where you're broadcasting from, by the name of Richard Maurice Buck, back in the 1870s. We had Walter Russell, recently is 1949, who believed in the cosmic consciousness and formed his own University of Science and Philosophy back in 1949. And then you've even got medical doctors. There's a Pim van Lommel, who's a cardiologist and near-death researcher in the Netherlands, who believes that consciousness is basically cosmic or universal. So mine is not a new idea. I've basically stolen those ideas from others because it makes sense. It's very rational.
Your previous books and research, did they help you in writing Matter to Mind, Mind to Consciousness?
They did immensely. As I mentioned, electromagnetic radiation is the same as light.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum mechanics actually has multiple arguments that physical light is omnipresent or everywhere. It's omniscient or all-knowing. And think if you were a photon of light, you could be everywhere in the universe. You basically know everything that was going on in the universe at that time. And the omniscience comes from that concept. And then the third omni, I call them the three omnis. The third omni is omnipotence. And I think simply, if your listeners just try to think of a photon that could be everywhere in the universe, and by being everywhere in the universe, you were basically all-knowing, you probably had a lot of power as well. There are some other concepts which I won't get into the details, but there's actually an experiment known as the quantum eraser experiment that shows that light can alter its behavior based upon its surroundings. Put into a very simplistic description is you have an experiment with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what experimenters found was that the photons traveling in that setup, if you altered the setup at the very end of the experiment, behold, light was altering its behavior in the middle of the experiment, which to us humans is just ridiculous. But you have to realize that for electromagnetic radiation and for light, which is a form of electromagnetic radiation, Einstein and experiments after him have shown that time does not exist for the photon. And it's that principle that when you see an experiment like the quantum eraser where light is altering its behavior in the middle of an experiment, when you've changed the end of the experiment, it's because time doesn't exist for the photon. And it doesn't make sense to us humans, but it's just an accepted element of physical light that we're still trying to understand.
It would seem to me, Doctor, that science is working very hard to prove that a lot of the New Age theories and what many religious philosophies have called over the years the power of prayer are coming to join forces to prove each other correct.
Oh, exactly. In fact, there are a couple of individuals that have written books Danny and Brinkley being
Yes.
one, and Betty Eady the other,
Yeah.
who both, when they were on the other side of their near-death experience, saw beams of light coming up from the earth, and they asked, the power that they were with, what those were, and they were told they were prayers. There's a lot going on.
I've seen NASA footage of what appear to be beams of light emanating from the Earth, and there are those within the UFO genre who say, well, that's proof of laser beams being fired at extraterrestrial craft. But what you've just said made more sense to me than this hypothesis that Earthlings are shooting down UFOs all the time. That could these images of what appear to be laser beams coming up from the planet actually be these thought waves that we were just talking about, these beams of light?
I think they are, Rob. When you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, only a very small piece of that is visible light. And the brain waves that we've been discussing are obviously all non-visible forms of light and electromagnetic radiation. And that could very well be the case also with those NASA photos that you've seen, as the photos are capturing what normally are non-visible beams of light, which we are unable to appreciate except under very modern technologic circumstances.
If I can find the link to them, Doctor, I'll certainly send it to you because I'm sure that you'd find it very interesting.
I would indeed.
Tell me, where do dreams fit into this entire scenario?
I think dreams and a lot of our creative processes are coming from these electromagnetic waves that our other fellow humans are emitting. How many times have we been asleep and we've woken with, just a genius of an idea, and we've wondered, we've scratched our head and we've said, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Or we've had a dream where something is prophetic and it actually happens. Either that or there are instances where we can't explain and you scratch your head and you wonder if you were really communicating with someone else. And, of course, there's very few ways of verifying that, but it certainly makes an awful lot of sense to me.
Taking this one step further, could we actually look at the possibility of instinct being the fact that the past and the present are one, and what we're actually gathering is an event that's already happened?
Yes, I think instinct is indeed one of those paranormal or supernatural type of phenomenon that we've always delegated to that realm because we've never been able to understand it. And yet it would explain why fish that are out thousands of miles out in the ocean suddenly return and travel another, several hundred or even thousands of miles upstream, combating just heroic and intense obstacles, blocking them from getting back to their original areas where they were born, just so that they can spawn and then die. It has to be a very powerful effect. We certainly have no explanation for it. We know of similar instances, whether it be with human or other lower animal forms, that these animals are just born with this knowledge, and it seems to be built into their mind, and yet, can we explain it? And no, we can't. So you have to wonder whether it's being emanated from some cosmic antenna someplace, telling these animals that, look, this is how you should behave under these circumstances.
Is it possible that the ancients had an idea of the connectiveness of the universe, and this is where the concept or the word God emanated from?
I think that's a very, very possible concept. You talk about the collective unconscious. You talk about, all sorts of primitive civilizations that Well, take, for instance, the Egyptians that built the pyramids, and we still have no idea how that is conceivably possible, even with today's technology. I think when you talk about radio waves being able to communicate one corner of the universe to another, it reminds me of an experiment that was first conceived by Einstein, which now goes by the name of EPR for any of your listeners that would want to look that up on the internet. The E, by the way, stands for Einstein. When the experiment was finally carried out, it was found that indeed light particles can communicate with one another, and they can do so instantaneously from one corner of the universe to another. And this is not just a theory. This is actually the consummation of an experiment that was carried out. Now, we're not talking about a light wave traveling faster than the speed of light, because that is impossible. We're talking about the exchange of information or communication between two photons. And that seems to be the key. Information has left physicists scratching their heads because of the fact that information seems to go from one end of the universe to another without any restrictions.
Just as if the universe had its very own fiber optic system.
Exactly.
Doctor, please stand by. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. Exonation, Dr. T Lee Baumann is our very special guest. He's the author of Matter to Mind to Consciousness. For more information on the good doctor, visit google.com/profiles/T Lee Baumann.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is The X Zone. We'll be back after this break. Don't go away.
If I could read your mind, love.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com. If you enjoy reading a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love From Out of the Woodwork by William S. Peckham. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He is visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle, reading a faded letter, opening an old locket, or opening a brand new casket in the basement. These visions will take you on a trip across southern Ontario from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Kingston. From Out of the Woodwork is now available in paperback and on your favorite electronic reader. To order your copy of From Out of the Woodwork, go to www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com.
Nation, Dr. T Lee Baumann is our special guest this hour. He's the author of a new book that is available to one and all, Matter to Mind to Consciousness. And Dr. Baumann, where is your book available, sir?
Well, thank you for asking, Rob. It's available at any internet website that sells books, so I've been very fortunate in that regard. So thank you for asking.
I remember, I can't remember who the guest was, but I remember talking to a guest a number of years ago, and they were saying that they believed that the ability to transmit thought instantaneously around the world had something to do with one's DNA, that when you thought of someone, you could actually transmit this message instantaneously to that person because we each have a specific DNA code. And for some reason, and once again, I can't remember who the guest was, but it was a very intriguing hour, that if I was to think of, all right, this message is going out to Dr. Baumann, if I could actually hone in my skills, that I could actually send that message to you and you would get it instantaneously. Is this possible?
I think it is, Rob. I honestly have not done enough research in that particular field to be able to answer that with any authority. But, I've read a lot of stories and articles about experiments using DNA that have some just remarkable or fantastic outcomes. And I'm still a bit skeptical, but I'll tell you, I'm too old now to doubt, or to just carte blanche disregard something like that.
You and I both, my friend. You and I both.
I've learned, like Tom Clancy, that reality is stranger than fiction.
Isn't that the truth? Tell me, Dr. Baumann, what would you like people to take home after they read your book?
Well, I would like for people to know that there are actually scientific corroboration and support for so many concepts that we have always alluded to as being paranormal or supernatural. Even though we don't have all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle aligned and put together yet, the pieces are falling into place. We're getting more and more data which shows that our minds are able to emit radio waves, again, all documented many times over, as well as being receivers. So it's just going to be a matter of time before we realize that what we've labeled as being paranormal, including ideas about God and prayer and instantaneous communications, there is a scientific basis for that. In fact, my own spirituality, I think, is probably has a stronger belief in an eternal being based upon science than I ever got from my being raised as a Christian as a child.
Dr. Baumann, is there a website our listeners can go to find out more information about yourself?
Well, actually, Rob, and again, I wish to thank you. It's the website you've been giving out, www.google.com/profiles/T Lee Baumann. So I appreciate you asking.
Dr. Baumann, thank you very much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you. If anything new comes up, please get a hold of me. We'll get you back on as soon as we can.
Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Sir, the pleasure and honor have been all mine. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself, Doctor. Once again, X-Zone Nation, to find out more information about Dr. Baumann, google.com/profiles/T tleebaumann.com. We'll be back after this news at 6.5 minutes past. Don't go away.